little bit of feedback from you guys. Normally we watch Dispatches from the Front on Sundays, so I know you guys really enjoy those. But I also know we have a second half of the debate between Ken Ham and Bill Nye that I also know you guys started, and it sounded like you wanted to finish as well. So did you guys have any input on what you would prefer? Do you want to start a new Dispatches from the Front or the second half of that debate? Do you guys have any thoughts? So I see Janet. Well, you always have an opinion. you have two opinions sometimes. So you think, yeah, I thought it was good. Educational. They're both, yeah, both are certainly encouraging. Dispatches from the Front. Oh, see, everyone close your eyes and read. Okay, Dispatches. Okay, I see Dispatches coming. Sorry, Janet, you get not voted. So we will finish that though at some point. So I think next Wednesday is the first Wednesday in June. So we are, like I said, officially calling COVID done. Okay. So we're going to pull the chairs back into our normal spacing after Sunday, and then we're going to set up Bible study tables in the back, and we're going to go back to our Around the Table summer studies. We'll break up men and women, so that'll be starting next week. So if you want to be involved and prepared, we have our books for the summer study are right there on the counter. I know many of you have grabbed them already. This summer we're using the book Knowing God by J.I. Packer. It is a classic layman's book on theology proper. So people read it to learn about God. Normal people read it to learn about God, right? So the schedule for that, I didn't have that out for you last week, but I do have the schedule for this week. I went back and forth on how we wanted to do this. There is a study guide included in the book. It's in the back of the book. So we'll use the study guide as the framework for the discussion. So I would encourage you to read the chapter ahead, to look at the questions in the study guide, answer them, and come ready to discuss the topics from the chapter. So that when we do the Bible study, of course, we'll read the verses that go along with the study, and then also have a discussion that goes along with that about theology. So this is the schedule. So the first week, which is next Sunday, we'll talk about. We'll read the foreword in the first chapter. So each of the chapters is about 10 to 13, 14 pages, kind of somewhere in that neighborhood. So we opted to do one chapter a week, and instead of kind of trying to rush in there, Tiff reminded me, we're doing Read Through the Bible this year. So when you add Read Through the Bible to maybe 20-some pages of reading, for some people that might be a bit much in their lives. So I thought, okay, we'll stick to one chapter a week. We'll do it, and then we'll do it well. Rather than trying to do a whole bunch of it, we'll do what we do well. So this is actually going to bring us all the way through the month of October. There's 22 chapters in the book. So we'll do that. So grab one of these papers so you can kind of follow along. One chapter a week should be pretty basic, but this will give you the dates. And then we'll adjust as necessary. All right, study number 10 in our study on the Christian worldview is a study on economics. Now, my hope for this is that I can buzz through this all in one session. So if you need a handout, just go ahead and slip up your hand. I think I see most of you guys all have them already. All right, now we do have a number of verses. We want to make sure we read along with these. So again, as always, I'm going to need your help. So here we go. Who will read Psalm 24 and verse 1? All right, Jennifer. Matthew 25:14. All right, Lizzie. Genesis 2:15. We'll skip Exodus 20:15. I'll just quote that one for you. That's easy enough. All right, Genesis 2:15. Exodus, we'll skip that one. Yeah, I'll just quote it. Genesis 2:15. All right. Karen. Proverbs 10:4 and 5. All right, Janet. Proverbs 28:19. Sandy. Mabel, can you do Proverbs 24:33? Let's see, Proverbs 12:24. This is Joe. Ephesians 4:28. Kathy. 1 Timothy 5:8. So I know I'll take that one. Proverbs 22:9. I'll give that to my wife. She'll get that one. All right. Yep, I think I might need you guys to take 2 tonight, some of you. So let's go back around if we can. Proverbs 28:27. All right, Jennifer. John, can you do Philippians 4? Hebrews 13:5 and 6. All right, Kathy. 1 Timothy 6:10. All right, Joe's got that one. All right. All right, I'm going to put my wife to work again with Proverbs 16:8. All right, Janet, can you do Proverbs 22:1?
Sure.
22:1. Proverbs 22:1. Under joy and possessions are not linked. Yep. All right, Proverbs 15:17. All right, Ray, you can grab that one. Proverbs 15:17. All right. Then we'll grab the rest of these as we go. All right. All right, so we're talking about economics. Now remember, as we do our study together, this is now kind of the end of a long series. So once we get to politics and economics and history, these are really applications of what we already talked about. So these are just the natural outcomes of what you believe about philosophy and the natural outcomes of what you believe about reality and ethics. I mean, all of those things, theology, they all kind of boil down into the end here. So as we do this, I need you to move a mouse for me. All right. As we do this, we're kind of coming to a close on this. We've talked about some of the major stuff already, about how our beliefs ultimately affect how we live, and bringing every thought into captive. We've looked at all these, and we'll sum these up eventually. So really now we're asking the question, who should control the means of production? When it comes to money, what role should government play in production of and in mining of resources? What should be done with money that is earned? These are questions you wonder, does the Bible really say anything about this? Well, the Bible certainly has a lot to say about money. The Bible has a lot of direct commands in regard to how we are to live our lives, and certainly all of those things play into what we're going to talk about here tonight. So we'll start with this simple idea: no economic system is perfect. So again, like we said with politics, the Bible does not describe a political system that man is supposed to use throughout history, because frankly, at different times throughout different portions of history, different political systems have been expedient for man throughout different portions of his history. God doesn't say this is the one you have to use. The same thing is true of economics, but we have to ask ourselves the question, given what we know about mankind and given what God has commanded us to do in the Scripture, which system of economics is most in line with biblical teaching? Because every economic system that mankind uses has some faults. There's always room inside of every system for the sinfulness of mankind to express itself and to turn that system into something that is detrimental to some. So, which one are we going to pick? So these are, again, we have to kind of start with some terms, right? So let's talk about socialism first of all. This is where the government controls the means of production and distribution of goods. So the government controls the means to produce and distribute goods. This is where the government is in charge of the economy. You say, is that a good thing? There are some pluses, but there also are a lot of negatives. What about communism? Now, communism is a subset of socialism. So in socialism, private property is still a thing. You can still own private property under socialism. But when it comes to communism, the government owns everything and controls the means to produce and distribute goods. So communism is like a totalitarian or essentially a oppressive form of government as a subset of socialism. There are others as well, but I really don't think we need to talk about fascism, and I really don't there's a lot of that stuff I don't think we really need to get into tonight. Number 3, we have a free market. That's where people work where they want and use their resources in the production of more wealth. So this is what we would call a free market, or another synonymous term would be capitalism. Resources are privately owned, and the government plays an intentionally small role. Now, even in the Christian worldview, the government does have a role to play in economics. I think we need to make sure we understand this. You remember Christians, and I don't have this on your handout anywhere, but I'll just give it to you on the aside as we begin here. Even as Christians, we acknowledge and support the idea, number 1, of taxation. Okay? Taxes are a good thing because the government has been given the job to help bring order to society, and in order for government to function, there has to be taxation. We have to pay for roads somehow, right? Okay, all of the things that we know and want as part of society, the government does need to work in those. Taxation is a good thing. People who work in government need to be compensated for their work. So Christians don't have a problem with taxation. We should pay our taxes. Read the Bible very clearly, stated by Jesus, stated by the Apostle Paul, encouraged throughout the Old Testament. Okay, we're encouraged to pay our taxes and to be involved in government in these fashions. But the role that government plays, we hope certainly is intentionally small. But government does still need to play a role even in economics, because in every system, the sinfulness of mankind will assert itself. And whether it's in socialism or whether it's in even a free market or capitalistic system, which obviously we're going to believe is closer to a biblical worldview, the government still has to play a role, because greed and oppression and these things are still there. They don't go away because the system doesn't change the nature of mankind. Only the gospel changes the nature of mankind. So we're not looking to a system to save us or to produce joy from the Christian worldview. So remember that. As we talk about all of that, I don't want you to miss the forest for the trees, because we're not looking for an economic system to create happiness or salvation for us. So you've probably heard this illustration before. I think it's an effective one. You say, okay, those are nice terminologies. Well, we're from Kiwani. We have 20,000 people and 100,000 cows. So if we're going to talk about economics, let's describe this with economics. See what I did there? All right. So if you have 2 cows, let's talk about 2 cows. How does each system work with you and your 2 cows? First of all, socialism, you have 2 cows. The state gives one to your neighbor and takes half of your milk. That's socialism. You still own a cow, but the government takes half or sometimes even more. In fact, you can pay in socialistic systems up to 60, 65, even 70% of your income into taxes in some fashion or form. Now, the government gives you enough milk, so to speak, or the amount of milk it thinks you should have. It would probably be a better description, but that's socialism. How about communism? You have 2 cows. The state takes both. You care for the state's herd, and you go wait in line for milk that the government will give you. That's communism. The state takes possession of the cows, but yet it's part of your job to take care of the cows, but then the government gives you what they think you need. So there is no private ownership of property anymore. Everything belongs to the state. You are part of the state. Everything's the state. They make all the decisions. What about capitalism? Capitalism, you own 2 cows. You buy 1 cow, or you sell 1 cow and you buy a bull. You begin to breed your cows, your herds grow. You drink your milk, you sell the extra, you retire prosperous after a long life of hard work. That's capitalism. Right. Fascism, you own 2 cows, the state takes both, hires you to care for them, and then sells you some of the milk. All right. So that one's, I like this one. I threw this one in. We'll call this bureaucratism, okay, or having a massive bureaucracy for a government. You own 2 cows. The state takes both, shoots 1 and milks 1. The milk spoils waiting for a report on the best milk storage procedures. Because anytime the government gets involved in something historically, they mess it up. Okay, that's just the way it is. Especially the larger the bureaucracy, the less happens. And in some ways, we like that. You know, in in our government, when one party controls, half, and the other party controls half of government, I'm really kind of happy with that because nothing gets done, and that's probably better for us for the most part, because only the very most obvious things get done, and that's maybe where we ought to be. So that's economics. All right. So we have these different systems, these different ways of doing things. So what is a Christian worldview? If we're going to look at this as followers of Jesus, what do we believe? Well, we're going to lean toward a free market system, some form of a free market system. Now, that doesn't mean we don't think the government should have any intervention, because mankind is sinful. So in some fashion, the sinfulness of mankind has to be met and addressed, whether it's going to be through legislation or whether it's going to be after the fact in the courts, because sinful man is always going to oppress other people for his own financial benefit. Okay, this is the world in which we live, and the world in which we will live forever until Jesus returns. So let's talk about some principles here that the Bible teaches. So number 1, let's talk about stewardship. As we look at material possessions, we believe that God is the ultimate owner of all things. Mankind is responsible to God for how they use the resources they personally control. So Psalm 24 and verse 1. So to whom or who is the ultimate owner of all things? Okay, the Lord, right? The earth is his, the world is his, all who dwell in it are all his. Everything belongs to God. But at the same time, God has committed his resources to mankind to use and to control. So look at Matthew 25 and verse 14.
For the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country, who called his own servants and delivered his goods to them.
All right, this is an illustration, of course, by Jesus about how the kingdom of heaven is. And it describes for us, I think, God's perspective with mankind is that God has committed things to us, and eventually we're going to stand before him one day and give an account for how we do this. Now, this is just a parable, but I think it's a parable that illustrates real life for us. This is how God does it. He has made us stewards of his possession, and we're ultimately responsible to him for how we use what we personally control. Number 2, we're going to look at the idea of private ownership. Private ownership. This, of course, is that God has entrusted control of resources to individuals, and taking those resources by force or by some other means is called stealing, theft. This is, again, Exodus 20:15. God says in the law, thou shalt not steal. Well, what is stealing? Okay. it presupposes the idea of personal property. Something must be yours in order for somebody else to take what is yours. That is called stealing. There are other places in Scripture, but I figure this isn't one I really need to make a case about for us in particular here. So we'll leave it at that. Private ownership. God has entrusted control of resources to individuals. Taking those resources by force or stealth is stealing. Number 3, we talk about an industrious creation. God has created mankind to work, and this work provides provision and meaning. Genesis 2:15. Karen has this one for us. All right. So God put Adam in the garden to do what? To work. Work is not a result of the fall. Sometimes as Christians we miss that. Sometimes we think work is a result of the fall. No, hard work is the result of the fall. Okay, it's the decay in society. It's the weeds. It's the rust. It's the fact that when you try and do stuff, everything breaks to keep you from doing stuff. That's the curse. That's the fallen part of our world. But the very work itself is given to us really as a gift by God. And it provides physical provision. What did Adam and Eve eat? Well, the plants that Adam and Eve tended in the garden. That's what they ate. So there's provision, meeting material needs, but then there's also a sense of meaning and purpose that we get from work. And God has work in both the natural and in the spiritual sense for us. And that's part of our meaning and our existence here on this earth. God has put us here to do something here on this planet. So as you read through the scriptures, you'll find that as God talks about work, those who do not work are condemned, and we call that laziness. Laziness is condemned. Proverbs 10, verses 4 and 5. Janet's got those.
He who has a slack hand becomes poor, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. He who gathers in summer is a wise son. He who sleeps in harvest is a son who causes shame.
All right, so in Proverbs, of course, they speak figuratively, but you notice one who gathers in the summer. What do we call that? Work. What do we call sleeping in the harvest? Okay, that's laziness, right? One is good. Hard work is good. Diligence brings prosperity. That elevates. Laziness brings poverty. You can see the Bible is telling us one is good and what is bad. Hard work is encouraged. Laziness is condemned. Productive labor is encouraged. Now, I want to put the emphasis here on the productive part here. We've got Proverbs 28:19.
He that tilleth his land shall have plenty of bread, but he that followeth after vain persons shall have poverty enough.
All right. So those who till the land will have bread. Okay, that describes somebody who actually does something productive. But those who follow after vanities, empty things, empty people. Oh, I got a degree in college in medieval Russian literature. Yay for you. Okay, you can go apply at McDonald's because that's where you're going to work, right? Okay, but yet somebody else goes and they get a degree in plumbing or electrical, okay? Or even architecture or law, some kind of actual job, okay? And people who follow vanities, what happens? See, God wants us to be productive. And there are a lot of wonderful hobbies, but that they're not necessarily productive. So if you enjoy medieval Russian literature, fantastic. I hope you read a lot of that in your spare time. But you need to find a productive job, something that actually benefits society, that provides something real for those around you and for yourself. So productive labor is encouraged. when you see the way the Bible talks then about laziness and productivity, how does it deal with that? When it talks about laziness, how do we deal with the person who is lazy? What do we do? Well, the Bible gives this description as you go through the book of Proverbs that natural consequences take care of this. Natural consequences take care of this. First of all, those who do not work should not be supported in their laziness. What does it say in 2 Thessalonians 3:9? This is mine. I have this one. If a man does not work, neither should he eat. If you don't work, you go hungry. Sooner or later, if you get hungry enough, what will you do? Work. Get a job. Right? So when we have, in essence, we have a society where, people don't work and they just go back and live with their parents until they're 42 and their parents take care of them. Is that a problem? Get a job. Get a job. You need to work, and don't expect other people to take care of you when you don't work. Does this also have application when it comes to economic systems? Do we want to have an economic system that provides for people who are just downright lazy and who don't work? Now, that being said, our current system, and maybe I'll take a moment here to comment on this, our current system is actually a very generous system. If you are physically unable to work in our system, there are ways in which you can still find provision through the government. Even though you are unable to work, we have something called disability. For something, obviously when you reach your retirement years, you have Social Security. Now, I think we all realize Social Security is the bare minimum, right? But when you look at this, we have a very generous system. Now, Social Security is a far cry from welfare. Okay, let me make sure I state that so you understand. Okay, welfare is beneficial, I think, for some people at some periods in their lives. Sometimes poverty is not a result of laziness. Sometimes poverty is a result of just God's providential work in someone's life. And for us to have a system that can help people who are economically downtrodden is a very generous system and is not necessarily a bad thing. But if you have a system that provides for laziness, that's a problem. And again, in any system, is there going to be, is any system going to perfect mankind? No. In any system of welfare, are there going to be some people who use it appropriately? Absolutely. Are there also going to be some people who milk the system and never work? Absolutely. So are we looking to perfect the system? Well, the system should hopefully help. But is the system ever going to fix us? No. From the Christian worldview, we're not looking for salvation in the system. We're just looking for something that follows along with a biblical idea. And when a person is lazy, the natural consequences of those actions are what? You have nothing. And if you want something, what do you need to do? Go to work for it. That's, in a Christian worldview, how the system should work. If you want stuff, work for it. Look at Proverbs 24 and verse 33. Laziness brings poverty.
A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest.
Go ahead and read verse 34 too.
So shall your poverty come like a crawler, and you need like an armed man.
So the Bible warns us, right? Laziness just kind of creeps in. It's just a little sleep, just a little slumber. I'm just going to take a little nap today. It's kind of like, you remember way back when you were young and healthy and skinny, one day you got the munchies and the next thing you know, you're like 30 pounds overweight, right? You're like, how did that happen? How did I get from I just had the munchies one day and all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, what happened? It creeps in, and laziness is the same way. And when we have laziness, what happens? Poverty and need or want. The biblical word there, want, is the idea of not having necessities. And when you are lazy, the natural consequence of that is you don't have what you need. And you know what? That's not a bad thing, because it will motivate a change in your behavior. And that's a good thing for the system to do. So the last one there, Proverbs 12:24. Joe, you have this one for us. Hard work elevates.
The hand of the diligent will rule, but the lazy man will be put to forced labor.
So you'll notice diligence brings a person to a place of rule. He is elevated. Laziness brings a person to a place of servitude. He is demoted. So there are natural consequences to our actions. And in general, any kind of economic system should reward hard work and should allow lazy people to suffer need so that they are motivated to work. So this is again, our Christian worldview. Inside of that system, generosity should also be encouraged. Let's look at Ephesians 4:28.
Let him who stole steal no longer, rather let him labor, working with his hands what is good, that he may have something to give him who has need.
So remember, in the biblical system, sometimes as conservative Christians, we get this idea that we should do free market economy and you should, you don't work, you don't have, that's your own fault. Okay, there is a place for generosity, and in fact, you'll notice that especially in the Christian worldview, we are encouraged that when the gospel transforms our lives, we labor not so that we can have more, but we labor so that we can have enough to give. We work so that we can give. So there's even a higher motivation inside of the Christian worldview for work, not just for my own personal provision, but also so that I can have enough to be generous to the people around me, especially those who have needs. Because in every society, people will always have needs. So work so that you can give. Number 2, care for family is an individual's responsibility. This is 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 8. Do you have that one, Dad? Did I give that one to you? 1 Timothy 5:8. And you guys know what's coming with this one. Care for family is an individual's responsibility.
But if he provided not for his own, especially for those of his own house, he hath denied the faith and is worse than he.
So as mom and dad begin to get older, whose responsibility is it to take care of them? It's our responsibility, right? And if there is no family to take care of them, the responsibility falls on who? The church. So you see how care for people is supposed to be the responsibility of individuals. It's supposed to be family, and then if not family, then it's supposed to be church. Where do we go from there? But see, what we're working on today is all of a sudden, whose job is it to take care of everybody? Well, it's the government's job to take care of everybody, right? And the government takes control of your possessions, all of your wealth. I mean, if you know that's the way the system works, right? Is if you go into a nursing home, what happens? The government takes control of all your possessions, and then they take care of you. Well, that's not really a biblical idea. That takes away responsibility from those whom it is a blessing to carry that responsibility, is it not? Is it not a blessing for us to care for those who cared for us? And it's an expression of our love, and it's ultimately our responsibility, and we don't want the government to take that from us. Again, I've told you the government is going to start sending out money. Apparently this July, the government's going to start sending out $300 per child. Because whose responsibility is it to care for children? There's an ideological shift that's happening here, and the government is taking on the responsibility of the care of children, and that's not okay with us, because biblically, that responsibility falls upon the parents. So beware. If the government pays for the children, the government may just take possession of the children. And there's a very real danger of that in future years. I love you, 1400. If you don't get that, don't worry about it. All right. So care for the family is an individual's responsibility. When it comes to generosity, being generous is blessed. Proverbs 22:9. That's you, babe.
He who has a generous eye will be blessed, for he gives of his bread to the poor.
All right, so God encourages generosity and tells us that when we are generous, especially to the poor, those who can't return what we give to them, that he brings us blessing. And then Proverbs 28:27, he encourages us to help the poor. I think, Jennifer, you had this one for us.
He that trusteth in his own heart is a fool, but he walketh wisely, he shall be delivered.
Nope, must have got that one wrong. Proverbs 28:27 is probably my mistake.
He that giveth unto the poor shall not lack, but he that hideth his eyes shall have plenty of purse.
All right, God tells us to help the poor, right? He who hides his eye. That's us looking away from those who have needs and hiding the needs of others from our eyes. See, generosity is encouraged. And that's where, when socialists critique the free market system, this is the part they miss, is that there is an ideal that's included in the system that generosity is supposed to be encouraged. And it's supposed to be a part of this. In a biblical worldview, when we talk about material possessions, it's really kind of almost hard to not begin speaking about things like contentment. That contentment should ultimately rule our hearts. And in this biblical worldview, when it comes to possessions, God is not calling Christians to work for more, more, more. I always want more, more, more. The Bible encourages us in so many places to be content. So we have to understand, first of all, that contentment is a choice. Philippians 4:11 and 12. I think John has these for us.
Not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. I know how to be abased, and I know how to be abound. Everywhere in all things I have learned both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need.
So I want you to make sure you understand this as we go through the Christian worldview. Because in the Christian worldview, possessions and happiness are not one and the same. So this is going to be a point coming up later on. But this is what when I say tonight, don't miss the forest for the trees. In all of the secular views of economic systems, they equate the idea of happiness with the idea of having material possessions. If you have equality and you have happiness and joy. If you don't have joy. You don't have happiness. And you exist in inequality. Now, according to a biblical worldview, Paul says, look, I know how to live like a king, and I know how to live like a pauper. And anywhere in between, it doesn't really matter. I've learned to be content wherever I am. And in the Christian worldview, we recognize that the whole system is not supposed to be all about bringing me happiness, because my happiness is not based on anything that I own. God provides for my needs, and anything above that is a bonus. So if I have food and clothing, I got everything I need. So contentment is a choice. Number two, contentment is also an act of faith. I think Kathy has these for us. Hebrews 13:5 and 6.
Let your conduct be without covetousness. Be content with such things as you have. For he himself has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. So we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper, I will not fear. What can man do to me?
Isn't that where joy comes from? And there's a higher virtue to which, from the Christian worldview, we look at things. God is going to give me everything I need. Stuff is just stuff. And it's all going to burn up anyway one day when Jesus returns, right? I mean, the earth and the heavens are going to melt with a fervent heat, and God is going to create a new heaven and a new earth. Everything you have is disposable. It's going to be disposed of one day. So when you begin to see things in that way, does it really matter what stuff I have? Stuff is just stuff. Sometimes stuff is more of a problem than it is a blessing, frankly. Because it's more stuff to take care of. It's more stuff to clean. Oh, I have 13 bedrooms. Yay. 13 more bedrooms to clean, 13 more floors to mop. So contentment should rule our hearts. Discontentment can also lead to multiple sins. So 1 Timothy 6:10, I think Joe has this one for us.
The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith and greediness, and pierced themselves with many sorrows.
The love of money is the root of what? All kinds of evil. And isn't that true? A desire for more stuff is a dangerous place. So we have to recognize, at least from a Christian worldview, it's not about stuff. So while we talk about this, don't miss the forest for the trees. We're not looking for a system that lets us have more stuff. Unless you're working to give, you might have an idol in your heart as a Christian that you need to address if you're all about stuff. So next we have joy and possessions are not linked. The Bible talks about these things being better than riches. And by the way, there are more. Let's talk about, first of all, righteousness, Proverbs 16:8. Better is a little with righteousness than vast revenues with injustice or without justice. So righteousness. So if you live in a place where right things are being done, isn't that something that really brings you joy? Whether or not you have stuff? Number 2, a good name and friendship. Proverbs 22:1.
Good name is to be chosen rather than great riches, loving favor rather than silver and gold.
Isn't it true that relationships are better than money? Loving favor? If you had to pick between friends and money, what would you pick? Friends. If you had to pick between your reputation and money, what would you pick? See, there are things that are better than money. So, philosophically, I've always tried to do this as a church. If there's ever a question that comes up about money, we don't care about money. What's more important is having a good name. Having a good name is vastly more important. God's going to give us whatever we need. So let's not pinch the pennies. Let's make sure we do the right thing. Because a good name is rather to be chosen than great riches. And then the last one, Proverbs 15:17. And I think this one is me here. Better is a little with the fear of the Lord than great treasure with trouble. Better is a dinner of herbs where love is than a fatted calf with hatred. So what is better than riches? Love. If you're in a place where love exists, you don't really care how much you have because it's just stuff. There's so many better things in this life than stuff. And if we let stuff be the center of our existence and the center of our purpose and the center, we're missing out on the best things in life. So we have to recognize that it's not all about stuff, and that ultimately stuff doesn't solve these problems. So philosophically, when we look at a system, if we make everything about stuff, we're missing so much. And isn't it true even in American society today when they're talking about all this equality and all of everything else? Now, some are looking from a perspective that's deeper than money, but a lot of people are just talking about money. Is it really going to help? You could give every single person in the country the exact same amount of money, is everyone going to be happy? No, because money doesn't make you happy. Then the last one here, under the Christian worldview, let's make sure we talk about oppression, because when we talk about a free market system, we want to make sure we understand from a Christian worldview that never, ever, ever is it okay in the Christian worldview for people to mistreat others and bring and allow injustice. So Leviticus 19:15 says this. It says, "You shall not do injustice in judgment. You shall not be partial to the poor, nor honor the person of the mighty. In righteousness you shall judge your neighbor." Oppression is universally condemned. Stuff should not be a factor in what is right and what is wrong. Justice should be the same for the rich and the poor, for the strong and the weak. Oppression is universally condemned. And as you look at this idea of a biblical worldview, a judge is never to accept a bribe, and it's normally assumed that those who are rich and those who are powerful are the ones who are going to be able to pervert justice with their resources. That is condemned. That is not okay. And somehow, in some fashion, that needs to be confronted. So whether it's through the system of government or whether it's through legislation, as believers we understand that there is injustice, and it is the job of government to step up and face that injustice. So even in a free market system, there's got to be some kind of something that addresses injustices. So oppression is universally condemned. Number 2, oppression contradicts our call to compassion. You look at Zechariah chapter 7, verses 9 and 10. This is what it says, "Thus saith the Lord of hosts, execute true justice, show mercy and compassion, everyone to his brother. Do not oppress the widow or the fatherless, the alien or the poor. Let none of you plan evil in his heart against your brother." We're called to have mercy. We're called to have compassion on everyone. So this is supposed to reign even inside of a free market system. It's not supposed to be hungry hippos, where everyone's just grabbing everything they can get. That's not a biblical worldview of what things are supposed to be. There's a call to something greater and something higher. But then we also learned that oppression earns divine retribution. And the Bible encourages us or challenges us throughout its pages to fear the Lord. Because if we are unjust to others and if we do live in a greedy fashion, it is going to earn divine retribution. For the Lord will plead, verse 22 of Proverbs 22, verses 22 and 23. It says, "Do not rob the poor because he is poor, nor oppress the afflicted at the gate. For the Lord will plead their cause." And notice this, "plunder the soul of those who plunder them." And isn't it true that those people who rob, cheat, and steal, their soul is plundered by God? And the emptiness that so often comes with that greed and that dishonesty is a punishment from the Lord. And we recognize that divine retribution will come, and if divine retribution ultimately in bringing justice to those situations doesn't happen here on earth, we recognize that it will happen in eternity. And there is a divine retribution for eternity that comes. So we're at that point, right? All right, I think we're going to need to finish here because I don't think I can do the rest of this tonight, in a reasonable amount of time. So this is a biblical view of economics. We want a system that encourages these things and discourages injustice. And our American system, quite frankly, does a number of these things well. Even when you look at simple things like tax law, and you look at some of the other portions of our system, think about how there are provisions inside of our economic system that encourage generosity. Just the very idea of tax deductions being given when you give to nonprofit organizations, the government encourages that through tax deductions. Is that a good thing? Should we need it? No. But the system encourages generosity. Is that maybe following along with a biblical worldview? Yeah. I mean, we have certain laws that address injustice. We have laws against monopolies. Is that a good thing? Because about the third hour of that game, aren't you really going to kill each other anyway? No, that's not what we're talking about, right? I'm talking about monopolies. You put hotels on Boardwalk and Park Place, you're going to kill us all. We'll never win. Last time we played that Titus one, he had hotels on Boardwalk and Park Place. All right. You're just going to beat us. You just can't handle the $2,000 rent it takes to stay there. And who wants to stay there for $2,000 anyway? But anyway, I digress. Okay, we do have rules against monopoly. We do have rules, and we do have like a Food and Drug Administration that has rules about how meat is produced, how drugs are produced. Are those things good things? I really believe they are, because natural man would do anything to make a buck, and would even sell poison to make a buck. To have a law that checks and has rules, I don't know that as Christians we have a problem with things like that. But then you begin to ask, how much? How much? Oh, the devil is in the details, isn't it? So we have to recognize as Christians that no system is going to be perfect. And, you know, when we start asking questions like, when bad things happen, how can we stop that from ever happening again? We have to be real careful about that, because we're coming, in a sense, from a viewpoint that is not Christian. Because bad things are going to happen in this world. And in order to stop every injustice from ever happening, what we'll have to do is lock everybody in their own homes. And then everybody in their own rooms in their own homes. But then if we do that, well, how are people going to be provided for? Well, people will have to bring them their food. Well, who's going to do that? Well, I'll guarantee you there'll be injustice. Anytime two people are involved, there's going to be injustice, there's going to be greed, there's going to be something, because man is sinful. No system is ever going to be perfect. So, again, be reminded, the solution is not in the system. The solution is ultimately in the gospel, because when a person is generous at heart, when a person is diligent and hardworking, when a person is willing to stand against oppression and treat fairly those whom he can oppress, when those things happen from the heart, that happens because the gospel has changed us. And the sin which rules us has been fixed by the power of the gospel. That's the only way to truly live these things out. How do we turn that into a system? And what's the answer? You can't. Because you can't legislate right heart behavior. So the system has to be designed to deal with sinful mankind. So how can the system encourage at least right behavior and discourage sinfulness? Well, as man, we do our best. So what we have is imperfect. There's some good things about it. There's some bad things about it. But I'd rather have an imperfect system than a totally broken one that doesn't work at all. So we'll talk about humanist views and pantheistic views, which, again, I love that one because it's just so out there. All right. Positive thought brings wealth, manifestation. Oh, there's some great stuff there. All right, we'll talk about that in coming weeks. Have a wonderful evening.